property owner sorted out with Robbins and Hanson? Is that your thought, or maybe I didn't understand that?
Yeah, since we're just kind of discussing this and there's no formal motion, I guess my motion would be to deny the request to forego the fees. If they wish to bring it back, then we can reopen it. Isn't that what she's asking, to waive the fees?
She is.
I say deny it.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second that.
Okay, further discussion?
I'm gonna have to agree with Jim on this, actually, being that they
Okay.
forged names and whatnot. I agree.
Okay, does everybody understand the motion then? That it's the request to deny any consideration to waive the fees? I mean, that's the essence of it, right?
Correct. If they
And
want to come
then-
back, if they want to have that option to bring it back to us at a different time, I would expect that they might be here to explain
Okay.
it, but if they don't, then it gets denied again.
So it's denied, and then the natural follow-on would be for Administrator Nicholas to convey that to the parties and see where it goes from there? I mean, is that the essence of it?
Correct.
Okay. Further discussion? Attorney Macy, are you comfortable with that action?
Well, I think, that, yes, we've not said they can't come back. There's nothing in the ordinance that says they can't come back.
Okay.
I would direct the clerk, though, that if it's placed on, or the administrator, that if it's placed on the agenda, that she also sends notice to the other individuals. You know, if the
Okay.
property owner comes in, I would hope that all of you would agree, we want everybody here. To do it again. If the other people don't show, we can't do anything about it, but I think a strong letter to them saying that, you know, if they don't pay it, you know, or if the board waives it for the church, they still might have a, well, they do have a cause of action against the two who signed the form.
Just,
I want one other comment, Mr. Chairman.
No, go ahead.
I want to remind everybody, you don't have to have a form. It's a courtesy, and where we may set up new procedures, and I understand that. There's no law that requires there to be a form. Communities started going to the form just so that people couldn't come back and said, nobody told us. So I'm not saying the form's not a good thing, but I have to constantly remind everybody, the judge who looked at this case in Waukesha County did not require there to be a form. He required there to be an appeal process. Notice and then an appeal process. So, it's a good habit, a good practice, I'm not dissuading it, but if somebody messes up and doesn't sign it, that doesn't mean they don't have to pay. Okay?
just a quick question to Supervisor Radke, the maker of the motion. Yours is simply to deny any kind of a request to waive the fees. There's nothing in that or implied in it that we'll continue with this matter unless it's requested by the people involved, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Does everybody understand the motion? And all who are in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, so that passes unanimously. Item 7C is agendized this way: discussion and possible action on commitment of road salt for 2019-2020 purchase. Administrator Nicholas and Chairman Fisher. I'm going to let Administrator Nicholas chat to that in a minute. You've got a thing that I put together. It's a single sheet thing that was a summary of a teleconference that I didn't initiate, but that I received from a gentleman from Waukesha County, informing me or providing information on what he claimed to be road salt tonnage that we used in the past 4 winter seasons, and then telling me how much salt we still have in their possession or storage facilities, if you will. Kathy has informed me that she's got different information that isn't consistent with that. And again, we have discussed this previously. They were looking for a reaffirmation or affirmation of how much salt we want to order for next year. So Kathy, why don't you take that away and share with people the kind of conflicting information that you've got.
Okay, so I reviewed with Bob from the county, which is the salt guy, and he, he's the director at DPW, and he had stated that we have 368 ton left. We had he had reached out to me before before the election and before before we could get to a meeting, that we had to give them our number for next year for backfill. So we have 368 ton of salt in storage right now with the county. And I spoke with Supervisor Radke at the time, and we decided to move forward with exactly what we've done in the last couple of years, which was 1,400 ton. I also did speak with our DPW director, so he was aware at the same time. I could get some information from him if he felt we needed more or less. So we did give the county information in April, early April, that stated we would like them to backfill us 1,400 ton, which would give us a possibility next year of 1,768. The cost per ton on the 1,400 ton is $77 a ton, but just keep in mind that we don't pay for what we don't use. The 368 ton are paid, that is paid for. We paid for that this year when we had that shortage. But the 1,400 ton is a backfill, and we only pay what we use for what we use, so, okay?
Jerry, you got anything to add to that or not? You don't have to speak. All right, you're good to go. He's shaking hands, so everybody understands, and I mean, if, I'm not sure that we need to take any action on this, but I would certainly think what we want to do to clear it up, at least would be to direct Kathy to communicate back in writing to this Dave Heil and to the salt guy. I mean, get email addresses on all those people and confirm that it's our understanding that we have, did you say 368 in?
368 ton.
Residually there, and we're making a commitment for another 1,400, so that'd make what, 1,768 available?
That's
For
correct.
next season, and I guess I'd suggest that we even ask them to confirm receipt of that and acknowledge it's correct in writing. That's my
Can do.
suggestion,
I would agree with
so we
that.
don't go through the confusion
Mr.
again.
Chairman, we do need a motion. We need a motion to confirm
Okay,
the action taken by the administrator regarding the salt.
okay, Director, do that, good enough. Who would like to make that motion?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second it.
I think everybody understands that, we don't need to repeat it, it's a directive to you.
I'd like to make a couple of comments,
Sure.
Mr. Chairman. For those of you new to the board, it used to be in the past that what you ordered you had to pay for and use. They would typically store it for you for free, but they ran into a problem 4 or 5 years ago when the big salt shortage happened, and then the next year everybody over-ordered, so the county sheds were over full, basically. So then the next year came and they said you can only order up to what you used the year before. There was a little bit of variance in there, but the caveat was you didn't have to pay for it, and if you didn't use it, it just went back into the general public. So that's kind of where we're at. They're not saying you have to pay for this or you have to use it, but the problem that you can run into that we did last year, this year, if that's the term that we're in, is if it's gone, it's very difficult to get more if the island and the contracts are dry. So I do know that there was some conversation about ordering a reserve supply. Can that also still be done?
I think part of our 14 would be considered a reserve,
Okay.
because that brings us up to the 1,768.
We might want to clarify that, because
Okay,
I don't know what this year will bring. I don't think anybody can predict that, but it's been kind of crazy with the wet weather, and that could go into the winter time. But if we can put more on reserve, would be better.
Do you know how many ton of sand we mixed this year, or they mixed, I should say, the county?
that we used 250, right around 250 ton of mixed sand and salt,
It was only at the end when we ordered the extra supply.
right?
When we asked the county in the past about mixing it for us, they actually said they typically don't do it because it's more expensive to mix sand with it, and it's more of a mess. Not to say that we can't or shouldn't, but that's kind of been their policy.
Yeah, I think this year, this last season, I think they allowed us to buy the sand salt mix because they were doing it themselves, because they were short also, that they were keeping track of their salt.
One last thing, and I put this on this little memo, this was told to me by the gentleman, but he said they were expecting the price this year to be somewhere in the range of $77 a ton. Do we know, Jim, or do you, Kathy, know, is that still being negotiated or not, or is that settled in, or do we know?
We have not received anything from the state on the final number yet.
Okay.
So they get all, what the state does is they get all of the counties and municipalities and school districts' numbers so they can say how many ton they're gonna buy, and they do their negotiating with the salt guys on, for a good price, and we just get to grab onto that as being part of the whole. So that has not come through as a definite number yet.
And that might be part of the reason for the reach out, that they're trying to absolutely confirm quantities with people so they can do the negotiation, perhaps.
Okay, so I do have a question. Supervisor Radke, you mentioned about clarifying a reserve, and that you may want to move on some tonnage for reserve beyond the 14. Do you have a number in mind and that the board is interested in if they are open to a different number for reserve?
I don't have a number, but I would ask Bob, the salt guy, what they typically do. I thought it was a percentage that they allow you to put in reserve. I would just suggest we do the maximum.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we're about to vote. Assuming we pass this, might we also ask that this be put on the next agenda as soon as the information is kind of nailed down? I think that'd be a good thing just to share it with everybody. Okay, everybody understand or remember the motion? All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. On to the next item is 7D, discussion possible action to direct the administrator to create a 3-year snowplow contract with Workman Enterprises starting October 2019 and ending June 2022, with final review of contract done by the town attorney, Administrator Nicholas. Go ahead.
Okay, so I was approached by Workman Enterprises, and they are interested in staying with the town. I had sent you an email concerning their prices that they were looking at for the 3 years. We have, in the past, just to give you an idea, that we've only had Workmen the last year bid for us. The years before, we had, in 2017 was the last year that we had Wolf Construction doing a portion of our roads plowing. And when they bid an amount of $135 an hour, plus they wanted a minimum of $90,000 for the season. And in 2017, the season they worked for us, we ended up paying them over $11,000 for absolutely doing nothing for us. When it came to fill that contract requirement. Workman does not have a minimum on like Wolf does. They are asking for a 3-year contract. They have been working with us since 2017, the latter part, and they have kept their price at $105 an hour consistently. They're asking for their first year in this contract to stay at $105, and the next 2 years to be at $110 an hour. So they're asking for a $5 an hour raise in the next 2 years. But they do want a caveat that if, for some reason, the diesel fuel goes up $4 or over while the time that they're plowing, that they get a surcharge of $5 an hour more. So that was The reason they want to go with a 3-year term, they're looking at upgrading their fleet, which will help us in the long run also if they have a newer fleet. And this will help the bank by showing that they have a contract. So I ask for your approval.
Attorney Mesa, do you want to address this? To give us some thoughts? Are we able to do this without ending up with any ramifications for needing to bid or whatever? Can we negotiate this?
This is a service contract. You're not required, it's not subject to the public bidding law. You can go out to proposals, but you're not required to go out for proposals. And I believe the action tonight, just so I understand it, so I think I've answered your questions, have I? But I want to clarify, the action tonight is just to authorize her to work with me to get the contract and bring it back for the board for final review at a later date. We're not approving the contract tonight.
I guess that would be, and we can have discussion on the rest of it. I want to listen to the rest of the discussion. I will support this, but would not support the part simply to be a final review by the town attorney, and that's not meant unkindly to you in any way, but there's a couple of moving parts to this. I think we've got a little bit of time to do it. I'd like to have the board have another shot at it. Who else has thoughts?
I'm not asking, and I'm clarifying that. I you know, if the
We're on the same
company comes
page.
back later with changes, we'll have to decide how many more times we want to bring it back. But I think our goal is to bring one that's acceptable to the company, acceptable to be in a legal form for your review and comment, but you can change anything at that point.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Isn't it anything over $5,000 we have to put out for bids?
No, that's only public service or public construction projects. This is a service contract, and it's so it's not subject to the snow plowing, legal services, building inspector, assessor. Those are all service contracts.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make the motion that we direct the administrator to start to create a 3-year snowplow contract with Workman.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second it just for discussion purposes at this time.
Okay, and just a clarification in that or implied in that is if this were to pass, it comes back to the board?
That's correct.
And I'm even asking Jim, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, discussion.
I think we should do a 3-year contract, but I also believe we should bid it out.
Well, my question is, I mean, how long, are they guaranteed so many hours, or how do we do this? We've already got 4 trucks of our own, correct, for the town? Is that right?
Jerry, to come up?
What?
Sure,
how-
Jerry, you can come on up and get in the conversation if you want.
Yeah, we've got 4 of our own trucks. We're actually doing half of the town. Our contractor's doing the other half. Workman Enterprises, other than other contractors, like other communities, have a flat fee. They get so much a year, whether it snows or not. If we're all plowing, we get a dusting of snow or an ice event or something that we can handle, we don't call them in. And they're good with that. So I think that's a real benefit to the town. And if you look at the numbers that we've spent in the last couple of years as far as contracted services for snow, you'd be surprised. I mean, we've done well.
I guess that kind of answers my question. I was just curious as to how much you actually use Workman and how much you guys do yourselves and stuff.
Well, we do
and
as much as we
if there's a
can
necessity
ourselves.
for it, so.
I mean, obviously, we can't do it all ourselves. And the nice thing about having a contractor is we don't have enough iron to do it ourselves. And if we have a breakdown, we work together, and we've had, good results with them. So I'm happy with them.
I guess one of the concerns that I would have, and this has been working well, but I mean, one of the concerns that I've got, I'm assuming that this, and maybe I shouldn't, but that the contract would basically designate the scope of their services. I mean, we have routes now, or at least areas of the town. I mean, we have an understanding of what we've been doing and what they've been doing, but I would think, and maybe that's something even for Attorney Macy to address them, and I wouldn't want to have the town be, I mean, are we in a position then that we are committing to them to those routes for the 3 years? I mean, that would preclude the possibility of us taking over another route or whatever. That's a kind of an
Well,
open
that's
question that
something-
I have.
That's something you could put in your contract, you know, I mean, if you guys, and that's totally up to the town board, you guys wanna buy more iron and hire more people and be more self-contained, that's entirely up to you. But at this point, they're doing half, we're doing half, and, it's been working well.
But if I heard you correctly, and I don't wanna make sure I understand it, they only come when you call them. So they don't always do half.
Exactly. We
If there's a
communicate.
dusting or ice, you do
Yeah,
it. So
if we
it's,
just-
even the current contract doesn't give them half as a guarantee.
Yeah, they don't, a lot of other contractors, they just go out, like say when the county goes out, they just go out. They go out when I call them, and, we communicate, obviously, and I says, we got this, and they're good with that. And not a lot of contractors that would like that.
So to answer your question, Mr. Chairman, no, we would make sure the contract says that it's as the director has indicated, only services upon request, and we can have nothing some years if we want nothing. They have to know that.
And I guess that's the reason I think we need to see that contract. I mean, obviously, from our point of view, we'd like to have them available, but flexibility, they may well be looking for commitment, and I think that's why we got to see what the contract says.
And I think locking them in at the price that they're giving you, I think it's a really fair price. I really do.
Further discussion from the board?
Just a couple of comments, Mr. Chairman. We've tried in the past to put it out for bid and have had limited success. I'm not opposed to that, but I think we've got a good partner that is willing to work with us. Before we get too carried away, I think we should see at least a draft of what that contract looks like. Kathy's pretty familiar with it, Jerry's very familiar with it, Workman's very familiar with it. What she's saying is exactly right. They need some commitment to go to the bank to borrow some money to buy some new equipment. So sure, there's gonna be some commitment on our part, but I think we're fooling ourselves if we think we can take the whole thing over. And even if we did have that, we'd still wanna have reserves to help us out in the event of breakdowns or major snowstorms or Jerry retiring or whatever. But I think they've done well. In fact, I would take it one step further, Kathy, and suggest that you at least start a conversation with them about the possibility of salt storage. I know they've got a lot of acreage that perhaps could be a alternative for them to store some of our salt in, if not all of it.
Okay, further discussion?
I have to agree with everything Jim said, and in light of what Dave said about putting it out for bids, I don't know if it's fair anymore. We already have their price here. Wouldn't it be fair to them if they already, another company already knows what their price is? So I know what you mean, Dave, but I have to go along with everything Jim says. It makes a lot of sense at this point after talking to Jerry now how much they actually did do. I didn't realize that they were doing half, so it's good to know.
I mean, if this is approved, it's a step along the way because they're coming back with a draft contract, right?
Yep. Right.
Okay. Is everybody ready to vote? Everybody understand the motion? All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, that was approved unanimously. Item 7E, discussion and possible action to authorize the town of Waukesha to mow and spray in the town of Waukesha rights of way. Chairman Fisher, I asked this to be put on the agenda, and to the extent they want to, I'm going to let DPW Director Noli and Weed Commissioner Borchard speak to this issue. I'm going to, for the minute, say that I think this is on kind of for emergency consideration. People have spoken to it. We've kind of headed off in some different directions in terms of interpretation of town ordinance and what we've done in terms of practical practice for a number of years. My attention or concern was directed to the fact that we have significant, with all the moisture and stuff, significant weed growth and ditch lines, and some of that may be a concern for visibility, for safety and that type of thing. So this is here, I'm going to call it basically kind of a temporary emergency thing until we can have further discussion on this. Again, 2 weeks downstream, we're talking about maintenance of town right-of-ways. That's going to be a big topic, talking about drainage, talking about vegetation, and so forth, but this is kind of for emergency consideration. Maybe before anybody jumps in, Mike or Jerry, you either you want to speak to that or not. I don't mean to put words in your mouth. You don't have to. It's up to you.
I guess the town has an ordinance as far as ditch maintenance for weeds, and I think Mike probably knows that better than
Get
I
right
do.
up to the microphone if you would, real cozy.
I guess the town has an ordinance that came up, like 2 years ago, and we discontinued mowing ditches, maintaining them, brush, whatever. I don't know if there's any clarification on the ordinance or what, and I know you have to like file a formal complaint or whatever. There's a procedure that you have to go through to take care of this. And I'm not a town resident, but as a DPW director, I'm filing a complaint because your ditch lines look terrible. Your grass is that high, it's visibility issues. It needs to be maintained, mowed, and taken care of. Whether that means changing the ordinance or whatever you gotta do, it's completely up to the town board. I think it should be maintained. We don't have the best of equipment, but we can do it.
And just to be clear, that's every ditch in every subdivision?
That
and-
is completely up to the town board.
I know,
their
but
ordinance.
if you're gonna make a complaint and make a suggestion, we gotta be consistent here.
It's basically on our main corridors, our main roads, Glendale, Beheim, Big Bend Road, just our main basic corridors. As far as subdivisions, I don't feel you should have to go in a subdivision and mow somebody's yard, but our main roads, most people don't have the equipment to jump down in a ditch and maintain it. And if they do mow it, they're mowing 24 inches. We need to go back 7 to 10 feet and open the roads up. It's better for the maintenance of the road. Your roads dry out. You got these canopies that are closing in. Like I say, the roads can't dry out. You're spending money on paving and whatever. Safety, people riding their bikes or whatever, the grass is hanging over the road. It looks terrible. And it kind of makes our department look bad too. Just my recommendation, you're the town board, you make the decision.
Questions of Jerry, discussion?
Well, I think that's a pretty powerful statement, and I think you should be careful about what you say to the public in regards to that. And you've been told before that sometimes you go a little bit over your boundary as far as what that means. So I don't agree with your statement that the town looks terrible and that every roadway is out of control and that, it's bad. But we have an ordinance that says that it's a property owner's right. So
Well, then I guess
if you
we
don't
need-
agree with that ordinance, then you can bring that up. But to stand here and say in front of the town board that you think everything's gone basically to pot, I think is a bad statement, and it looks very poorly upon your judgment. So
Well-
I'm sorry, but I don't agree with that.
Well, if we have an ordinance, I guess we need to enforce it then and get it done. That's my opinion.
Exactly right.
Well, something's gotta get done.
But you know what the get done means? That means that upon complaint, we send them a letter, they don't mow it, we mow it, and we charge them. Okay, just so everybody knows what the response to a complaint results in per the ordinance.
The reason that I asked this to be put on the agenda for discussion purposes, and again, is when I hear people speaking to me and speaking the word safety, I felt compelled to at least bring this before the board to discuss the issue. And I understand we've been all over, the town board has been all over the road on, no pun intended, but whose responsibility it is for doing ditching and all that kind of stuff. We're not going to solve all of that tonight, but I put this on to see whether there was, whether the town board thought it was appropriate to allow or permit DPW to do some of these things that they think are the things that are most impactful for safety or whatever. I mean, as a practical matter, I'm not sure that we could, how long it would take us to get all the letters out to people and to back charge them and do that type of thing. We're sitting there in the middle of June, so that's the reason I brought it up. I mean, we're gonna have the bigger discussion on this in 2 weeks, but we're in the middle of it. So further discussion, or I don't know, Mike, whether you have anything, you're welcome to talk, you don't have to.
Yeah, I would like to add a couple things, if you don't mind. Yeah, I'll do whatever the town board decides, that's fine. But just 2 examples of 2018, these were legitimate complaints from town residents that were submitted, and the paperwork was given to me to investigate, and I did, and I wrote it up. This was all the properties from 164 to Double X on Town Line, I believe. And the only people that did anything was the Girl Scout camp. Everybody else has kind of ignored it, and I was basically told to kind of just drop it. The other issue was on.
Wait, I gotta ask you a question. Was this obnoxious weeds?
No, it was
Well,
for,
then,
not,
wait, then what's your jurisdiction? Because we have to
Okay.
be very careful
Yes.
that none of us exceed our jurisdiction. So if a complaint comes into you about a junk car, you can't do anything about it, right?
I understand, but part of the weed commissioner's job addresses lengths of weeds and grasses exceeding 12 inches, which it did. That's clearly stated, and that, I clarified that with the administrator in a meeting about a month ago, and it's in writing. And it has been that way. So that's why those complaints were given to me. And it's
Well,
just,
were the complaints given to you from the administrator or from whom?
it was a written complaint from a town resident that was submitted to the town office and was put in my file. That's the only reason I investigated it. Okay, and I have and specifically the 8 properties on Pheasant Run, which are not on a main drag, and it was a resident in that subdivision, which I have copies of their complaint and all my paperwork, and it was relating to weeds, grass, etc. in the ditch area, okay? And the definition for the weed commissioner at that time did not designate that, okay, it just said weeds and grasses exceeding 12 inches, etc. Did not designate if it was in a culvert, ditch area, or on their exact property. So that's why it was handed to me. Actually, most of the property owners on Pheasant Run talked to me. We had a pleasant conversation, and they hired contractors and cut everything. There was only 1 or 2 that objected to it, and apparently called one of the town supervisors, and the supervisor said, well, you don't have to cut it. And then I was told later on by, at the time, Clerk Treasurer Kathy Nicholas, that the ditch areas were not my jurisdiction. So that was kind of the end of it at that time. So that's all I have to say on that. So I'm just, the idea was, I was given the orders, which were legitimate complaints from town residents. I followed up on it, I did my job, and then I was told to back off. So there was, for whatever reason, confusion as to which direction I'm supposed to go. So as of right now, there is one incident that came up earlier this year. It was a complaint for noxious weeds in a culvert ditch area on Big Bend Road. And I read the Wisconsin state statute and the town ordinance, and it was determination that because it was noxious weed, it didn't matter if it was in the culvert or on somebody's immediate property. And I actually wrote up the town of Waukesha for it because they're the controlling property owner for the culvert and ditches. And the issue was addressed. It was taken care of, and that was it. So,
Okay, thank you. Continuing discussion, town board.
Doesn't our weed ordinance actually state that the town is responsible for the right-of-way, noxious weeds, grasses on the right-of-way? Mike, I believe it's in, I saw it under weed commissioner, the weed ordinance states that the town is responsible for the right-of-way, weeds and grasses, correct? Isn't that correct?
the maintenance of public ditches ordinance states that the property owner is supposed to take care of all that.
It states this town is responsible for that.
No.
The,
Wait a minute, I saw it.
the noxious weeds, as far as the noxious weeds go, the state statute says the property or controlling body or person or organization.
The microphone.
Wisconsin state statute clearly states that the controlling body is responsible for the noxious weeds, and that was the only thing I addressed in there. Okay, it was not the response, not covered under the maintenance of public ditches.
But we have an ordinance that says that even if the state law says we're responsible, we can defer that responsibility or confer that responsibility to the property owner. They're
Okay.
responsible pursuant to 36-13 sub 2 to maintain it. So if we get a complaint that there's a noxious weed in our ditch, we notify the property owner to fix it.
Okay, well, that's not the way it was presented to me.
Well, I'll be happy to look at whatever you looked at, Supervisor, but this is what we were given.
I want to back up. I want to just back up, I guess, a half a step here for tonight. And this, we're not going to resolve this tonight. This issue and discussions go on. May not even be resolved during this growing season. But my request of this is very simple for tonight, and I think the town board has the authority to do it. We can decide to do something or to do nothing. I think that's the first decision you gotta make. If it's to do nothing, we can move on to the next agenda item. If it's to do something, then it's whether we allow or direct the DPW people to go out and start cutting some of the worst ditches, whether we try to see how many notices we can get out to people to do it and start mowing their ditches, sending them bills. I mean, we got to come up with some kind of decision what you want to do tonight. I mean, it boils down to about that simple. We can continue to debate some of that and decide what we want to do with it. Do you want to do anything with this tonight or not? And if you're simply saying just leave it on, we can go on to item 7F.
I would like to move that we allow Jerry to cut the main thoroughfares, the Big Bend roads, where the main roads immediately, actually, because I do know
The
that some
motion
of
has
these
to be
are-
much more specific. You're gonna have to name the roads, and you're also gonna have to admit that you're violating your ordinance, which, if you wanna violate your ordinance, go ahead. I have to warn you against doing that, but you can't tell him major roads. Because I'll tell you, my road is a major road then. Every road in town suddenly became a major road. So if you wanna make a list of roads, and you wanna say you're gonna ignore your ordinance, that's fine, but it's gotta be more specific than that.
Let me ask you a question. I don't want to be argumentative with you, but violating the ordinance. But I think our ordinance and some of the stuff says basically we have an obligation to look out for safety. I mean, I think that is certainly embodied in our ordinances. If we've got people reporting out concerns about safety for people on bicycles, pedestrians, vehicles, and so forth, how do we simply look the other way to that part of it when that's what's being reported to this town board? Don't we have an obligation to deal with
The
that?
ordinance specifically states to it.
But
You have to follow your ordinance. Your ordinance says that in the event the property owner fails to maintain the ditch, culvert, or swale as required under this section, and the town, that the town will go and do it and charge them for it. I'm not telling you to ignore safety. I'm just also telling you not to ignore your ordinance.
Can I say one thing?
Sure.
If I get somebody calls in and there's a complaint of a field division liability where you can't see around the corner, okay? And there's an accident, who's liable for that?
I think that's a far dramatic example
Well, I had to go
than,
do it today.
yes, you're required to make sure that the site distances are maintained, but we're talking about maintaining the ditches.
That's in a ditch. It's in a ditch. You're going around the corner, you can't see.
That's
through it.
far different than mowing all of the ditches 10 feet back on every main road in the town. So I
question
think we
is-
have to distinguish between a stop sign that's blocked by a limb and trimming roads
No,
back
it's
10
not, wasn't a
feet.
limb. It was brush in the ditch that I had to maintain so you could see around the corner. Okay? Who's responsible? Do we give them a notice and give them a citation and wait 5 days, or do we wait for the accident?
Well, I don't see any, let me look and see if there's a 5-day requirement in here. I'm not aware of any 5-day requirement.
Well, I don't know what the procedure is. I really don't. or do I take care of it? I mean, my question is, what am I responsible for? What are my duties?
Is there anything in there about brush? Because I own several hundred feet on Glendale Road that has trees overhanging the road.
Trees, brush, well, yeah, what am I responsible for?
So apparently that could be written up also.
You're gonna write up an awful lot of people if we're gonna follow this
Yes, we will.
ordinance. Glengarry Road and Big Bend Road right now, you can't see to the south when you pull up to the stop sign because of the grass. There's no brush, it's just grass.
And conversely, it would take us an army to cut all of that and trim it to
No,
everybody's
I don't think it'd take, we
specifications.
used to cut it all the time. This
It
town
used
used
to
to
be
be cut every year. They cut the weeds twice,
It's
if I'm
something
not
you keep up
mistaken.
with.
And there was never a burden on the town.
You got an ordinance from 2011 that says it's the property owner's responsibility.
I think it's a crazy ordinance, I'll be honest with you. I think it should be rescinded or
And
redone.
that's what should be done, instead
Yeah.
of sitting here and debating who should do it and whether or not we have noxious weeds in there or not. And our DPW director says every road is clogged, and our weed commissioner says he's gotten one complaint so far this year. I think it's ridiculous that we're just bantering back and forth. If you want to change the ordinance, change the ordinance. I'm not in support of saying that we're gonna waive our ordinance just because, and I won't support that moving
Well, I
forward.
gotta go with the safety issue. I think there's some issues out there that's,
And change the ordinance.
well, it's gonna take forever to change the ordinance when we have a problem today.
Can we come up with a list of roads for the DPW to cut? As
Wait, okay, but be specific. Are we cutting them because it's a safety hazard and somebody's, the entire length of the road and the ditches is a safety hazard for driving on that
sightlines.
road? Because I gotta defend this in court.
Okay, because if children are playing around or hiding in the tall grass along Glendale Road and they jump out and get hit by a
In all due
car,
respect, children are not supposed to be playing in the road.
they're not supposed to. Everywhere you go, they have
They're not
basketball
supposed to be
hoops and
playing in
roads.
snowdrifts either, than they do when they
Exactly.
get hit by snowplows. So I mean, it's just
And
the
there's not,
kids.
and, you know, we do what we can with snow and we do what we can with roads. I just wanna make sure you really are talking about safety hazards. Or are we talking about trimming for people who don't wanna trim?
Nope, safety hazard.
I'm all for safety hazard.
Then you have to define safety hazards so that the DPW knows when to lift the blades and when not to lift the blades. To be fair to all of your property owners, to just send them down the road and say they're all safety hazards, then I'm gonna say in my subdivision, that's a safety hazard too. And then you might as well trim everybody.
Well, then they can call in and it can be checked.
And why are we making a rule different? You're making some automatically safety problems, but others they have to call in. Why aren't they just following the ordinance now and calling in?
So my question is, are you saying you're advising against a motion that leaves it to discretion of the Director of Public Works as to what constitutes a safety hazard? Is that what you're telling us?
No, as long as he's got a clear understanding of what safety hazard means under the law. And there is a safety hazard when a stop sign is blocked, but it's not a stop sign under the law that, because children can't play in the grass in the ditch.
Okay, well, why don't,
That's a total different distinction of what constitutes a safety
Okay, then-
hazard under the law.
then why don't you outline what would constitute a safety hazard under the law for Department of Public Works, Noli?
Now,
Yes.
that would take about 15 or 20 cases to look at, and no one even told me this was on the agenda, let alone ask me to prepare for that. I am not prepared to do that, Mr. Chairman. That's an unreasonable request, in all due respect. This is a very highly detailed area of the law as to what constitutes a safety hazard.
But let me, I guess, reverse it the other way. If, and I understand, appreciate that, but if we allow him to use his discretion to do that, if he thinks something is a real safety hazard, what exposure does the town have if we do that? What kind of trouble are we getting into?
None. He's required to make sure that there's a safety hazard, but he should notify the called property owners and tell them to fix it, and they don't fix it within, a very brief period of time. According to the ordinance, he'd have to do it and charge them. He's got an obligation to do that if it's truly a safety hazard. But what I've heard many people say aren't safety hazards, they're aesthetics, and, I don't know that, I think there's a big difference between, 10 feet back, trimmed back, trees, brush, grass, 10 feet back versus, not being able to see a stop sign. He has an obligation to make sure people can see stop signs and similar things. I don't think he realizes that.
What is the charge for the town for going to mow the ditches? Or is it per foot, per mile? Per hour?
Per hour. So it's whatever equipment we have, the state rate on the equipment per hour, and then the number of, and this is for anything when we do something, the amount of time, our filled amount of time for for our staff and their benefits when they're on, if they're using a truck, if they're using a trailer, or if they're just using, so any kind of equipment plus the people's time is the actual cost.
What if you had a resident make a donation for the town to go out and cut for a day?
We can't do things on private property. We can't plow, if they decide they don't want to plow their driveway, we can't go out and do it for a
But
day.
now we're talking about private property and right-of-ways, town right-of-ways.
We have an ordinance that says they're responsible for the right-of-way and the ditch and the swale. And if they don't do it, you know, you can call them up and say, are you gonna cut your ditch? And they'll say no, and we'll say, great, here's your bill, and that's fine. I mean, I think we can get to where you're going by
Well, yeah,
them
I'm
just-
willing to make a donation to have some of these ditches cut, because I think it's ridiculous that we bill residents for ditching and cutting ditches in our right-of-way.
The ordinance predates me, Mr. Supervisor. All I'm telling you is you gotta be very specific, because it's not fair that somebody gets their ditches plowed and or cut and somebody else doesn't get them cut. So you're gonna have to work on this, as the chairman has indicated, to distinguish, you know, that why do the subdivisions have to mow their own, but out in the, I guess whatever he called the main roads, they get theirs cut. That's the problem. That's the problem we've had since they adopted this in 2011, which I don't know about all of you. I wasn't here in 2011, and I don't know if anybody else was here in 2011. But that's what they wrote, and you can change it. But you're gonna have to figure out a way to change it that's fair. Because I don't think the DPW director is asking to mow all of the ditches in the subdivisions.
No, we always used to have our certain ones that they took care of. They knew their route.
Well, I think most subdivisions, everybody cuts their lawns right out to the road. I don't see too many weeds in subdivisions, but
Maybe they're doing it because we have an
Well,
ordinance that requires them to do it.
what do they do in Vernon?
No.
Vernon cuts all theirs. How do they get around this?
I don't know.
Every other municipality I know cuts the weeds on the side of the road, except the town of Waukesha.
Every single municipality does.
Well, I don't agree with that. I mean, you're just making up statements here.
No,
as
you
go
find
along.
I am
one
not making up
municipality.
statements, Jim.
You
That's
find
not-
one municipality
no,
in the state of
the Berlin,
Wisconsin
they all do it.
that
All right,
doesn't.
so I will find you that one.
You do that.
And then will we put this to rest? And then
Yes,
you
we
wanna
will.
change the ordinance?
We will.
Got it. You'll have it by the next meeting, if not
Sounds good.
before.
I believe there was a motion made. I don't know whether it was seconded or not.
What's the motion?
What's that? Supervisor Stigler, I think, made a motion. I don't remember the exact words, but basically to
Yeah, it was to.
mow the ditches. Was that correct? That was the essence of it.
To authorize Jerry to mow main roads. But I guess that have to name specific roads, and if we do that, that'll take another two weeks. I'm not sure if that's gonna fly with the attorney, so. But I would like to see the roads, I mean, there's roads out here, that stop signs that you have to pull way out to get around the weeds. That's on crests of hills and things like that. The weeds are impairing that. And I think Jerry knows which one I'm talking about, because I think last year he did cut it. Somebody did anyway, because people couldn't see. It was a safety issue, and I'm sure it's not the only intersection in the town that's like that.
Okay, anything further? If not, I guess the motion dies for lack of a second. Any further discussion?
Well, I'll second it.
Okay. Second to the motion then, further discussion? Okay, all in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Opposed.
Motion passes 3-1. Next item is, business is 7 F, and it is discussion and possible action to give authorization to exceed weight limits on some roads in the town of Waukesha while construction of the West Waukesha Bypass project continues. I asked to have this put onto the agenda. I think you've got some information in the packet. I believe the general understanding is that there will be some road closures. One is Salesville Road, which I believe is supposed to be closed at the main intersection out there from, I believe, the first week of July, and they're hoping to have that reopened by the time school starts. I think it would be appropriate, it's a communication we solicited, and Kathy may speak to it, but one of the roads under consideration for discussion is Town Line Road, and that being the Town Line Road between the town of Genesee and the town of Waukesha. And we do have a communication on that. Both Kathy and I talked to Sharon Lair. You might want to read the one you've got. I've got one here that was from Tuesday of this week, June 11th, that said, pursuant to our conversation this morning, this will confirm that at our town board meeting last night, our board took the position that they are opposed to heavy truck traffic using Town Line as an alternate route while Salesville Road was closed. And just the background of that Town Line Road is shared by the town of Genesee and the town of Waukesha between Genesee Road and up to Sunset, or wherever the cutoff is by Sunset. Wernway, thank you. Discussion.
Is Sunset gonna be open soon? I mean, they're paving that intersection pretty good now. I know it's concreted and things like that. How long is it?
They believe in 2 weeks,
In 2
Sunset will
weeks?
be open.
That would kind of alleviate all these problems with trucks and stuff, correct? I mean, we'd be getting back to what we were before the
Well,
construction started, right?
that would be the assumption that they would stop going down that road, but we have no control unless our police officer's sitting there.
Well, I mean, we've had this situation before the road's construction started, so I don't see any change in that. Once Sunset opens up, we're kind of back to what we were before the construction started, correct, as far as traffic goes?
In that area,
And if the
yes.
trucks are using, they'll be back to their own routes again.
When that part is open, I think the question came to Salesville Road. They have, and it might even be in the packet, they have some suggested detour routes to the east. About that, again, the request was, and we could take them one by one, but the request was Town Line Road, Merrill Hills Road, and then Green Country Lane. And again, I guess just take those one by one. Town Line Road, I think the discussion on that is largely ended in as much as Genesee took action. Their town board said no way on that. Further discussion? I think right now we're correct, and I mean, Jerry gave us some information. Those roads, and Jim, you might even well remember that, we went through that. I think those are basically roads that do not allow through trucking on them, is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, we took formal action and put up the signs. I'm not in favor of restricting truck traffic, but the signs are up, and to do this for a small period of time, I'm not in favor of that. I think we need more enforcement from our officers that I don't think have ever written a weight violation. And they
Okay.
continue to go through those same paths, and word's pretty well out that there's no consequences.
Okay,
So if you want to stop it and you want to make the residents happy that have complained about it, then do some enforcement of it. We've got rules in place.
okay.
But to temporarily put this, waive it, no, I'm not in favor of that at all, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you. Who else? Somebody like to make a motion? I think we need to take a formal action on this. Would you agree, Attorney Macy?
I don't think you need action if you're not gonna do anything. If you're not gonna waive
Okay.
it, the law's the law, right?
Okay, I'm just asking because I
No,
know
I'm
often.
just trying to make sure I'm understanding what the discussion and action was to give authorization to exceed weight limits. If
I
you don't
understand.
make any motion, there's no
Okay,
authorization.
all right, fair enough. Further discussion, or anything?
The weight limit right now is no through trucking 3-ton, correct?
Right. Okay,
That's-
then I sense we're ready to move on. Okay.
I can't, I just either, I think I agree with Jim on that, I just don't see any purpose to it. They're gonna open up Sunset before long. I think a lot of the trucking on Merrill Hills Road and all that stuff's gonna go away.
Okay.
I mean, they've got truck routes now for bypassing.
Back when we submitted this, we didn't know when Sunset was opening. This was a few weeks ago. Now we're getting clear.
If you want to come to the microphone for a minute, you can. I mean,
Yeah.
in as much as you kind of instigated this agenda item, I put it on in a general context because it's not something to apply uniquely to you. That's why it's
Sure,
agendized. that
and I
way.
totally agree with that. It shouldn't apply to everybody. But a couple of things, 3-ton weight limit, you can't drive an F-350, or almost any F-250 down those roads.
You're right.
That's absurd because I know for a fact there are many residents back there that drive F-250s. That's number one.
We have board members that drive, that exceed the weight limits.
Correct.
I agree, I think that
And,
was
and that's,
ridiculous.
they can't help it, you know, to a certain degree, they don't even know it because that's a normal truck for people to drive. So that's number one. Number two, I wasn't aware, nobody was aware when Sunset was opening. I had heard anything from June 1st. Now, as of today, we actually have confirmation from the supervisor that it's supposed to open on the 24th, but now, Kathy, you're saying 2 weeks. So we don't know when it's opening. And the main thing when I submitted this was going to the south as well. We're talking about safety, but kind of paraphrase what John Macy was saying, kids shouldn't be playing in the roads. Drivers are, I would hope following, I know my guys are, from a standpoint. We do stay off those back roads. We're only asking for a temporary on this, only as the roads reopen, when Sunset reopens, we don't need town line anymore. But I do know that Salesville is gonna be closed until at least school starts. I've heard that there's fines possible if Salesville's not opened again by the time Waukesha West starts school, but I'm hearing back and forth on it. I do have confirmation that it will be closed sometime in the next week or two, up until sometime in August.
Can you, I mean, the question, you look at some of those routes, I understand I understand it's a bit of a hardship and difficulty, but I mean, my understanding is that Genesee will never be fully closed. I mean, if you're trying to get to the south, can you go Genesee, and then I believe Oakdale is what they are?
Oakdale, and then so if you're working behind Waukesha West,
Right.
which would be a normal 2-mile drive, will all of a sudden turn into a 10-mile drive each way,
Understood.
and then back around. Plus, you're putting those trucks making turns more onto 59, which is a bigger risk. Have you ever watched our trucks turn onto 59? And it's only getting worse now with all the traffic building up because you have people with stop signs holding up all the traffic down at the intersection, and then they blow it loose, and then we're trying to turn onto the road. I realize we have to do it, but if I can minimize that, why wouldn't I? And I understand if you don't want to put 50 or 60,000 pound trucks back through the subdivision, I get that. But can we have a reasonable weight limit for this period of time? And Jim, if you would like, I would be more than willing to pay for the new signs if necessary, because I believe we'll only need 2, one on the entrance and one in the exit, and I'm only looking for one of the 2. I just gave some options. We can just say Green Country is it, and that's it. And I'm okay giving up Town Line and Merrill Hills, assuming the road opens, Sunset opens in the next 2 weeks. But we don't know what that's gonna be.
Are you taking Class B then, or?
I'm throwing it out. I'd be grateful for anything at this point, because frankly, anything short of the smallest truck,
Right, you
the
can't
smallest
go
trails
down.
trucks, you can't go down there, period.
Right.
True.
And I think to a certain degree, those road limits should be lifted to a higher level in general, because residents shouldn't even be driving back there or driving through it because their trucks are too big, and they're naive to it. They don't realize their trucks are that big because everybody drives them everywhere.
But let's be clear, you can go down the road if you're making a delivery on it, and the shortest possible route. You're not exempt from going down that road if you've got a delivery on that particular road.
Correct. I understand that, but what I'm talking about
I
is.
get it. I run a trucking company, and it sucks. And it's gonna cost you time, and it's gonna cost you money. But the
It's-
board made a decision a while ago to go with the 3-ton. I don't necessarily think that's the best number to go with, but you can't really break it up and say, well, this road we're gonna go higher, and this one's gonna go lower. It was recommended to us, and the board took action to keep them all the same. And the sheriff's department were the ones that were spearheading that, to saying that if it's all over the board, it's too tough to enforce.
Correct, understandable, but I've been there many, many years, and that road used to be 5-ton. So what caused it to drop to 3-ton? I know they've been redone. Are we, I feel like we should be if we're gonna be investing in redoing these roads, we should be I'm not saying they need to be state highways, I'm not saying they even need to be county roads, but I think a logical would be something that should be amenable in the future. That's beside the fact at this point. If we need to put the signs up, I understand it would be a burden on the town and a financial burden, and I'd be more than happy to pay for the signs. And if I have to pay an hourly rate to have the DPW hang it within reason, I would be willing to pay that as well for the short time period. So I'm not asking to burden anybody in that. And to all the citizens, I hope if they feel somebody is driving too fast, step back there, let me know. I've had one person this year ever call me, and the actual person that was driving the truck lives in the back subdivision. I've known that person for over 30 years, and he hates people that drive too fast, but sometimes when you see a truck driving through and it's jiggling, it sounds like it's moving faster than it really is. And so if we can raise the limit, even if we were willing to, 26,000 pounds would be great, 16,000 pounds would be great, but I think something more reasonable than 3,000, even if it's temporary, would be fantastic.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, then I guess we're moving on to 7G, discussion and possible action of changing names on some roads in the town of Waukesha related to the Waukesha, West Waukesha Bypass Project. I asked to have this put on the agenda. You've got, I think, a copy of a email communication there. It's actually part of meeting minute notes from the 5th of June, meeting I attended at Waukesha County. We're not going to get deep into this tonight, but part of what will be future discussion is request for jurisdictional transfer of some of Merrill Hills Road. We're not going to get into that tonight. That's a whole nother subject we looked at one time before, but I don't know that we need to decide on this tonight. We've got to give some thoughtful consideration for sure. Merrill Hills Road is going to be segmented. There'll be the portion that goes from Genesee to the railroad tracks. There'll be a section that goes from the railroad tracks to where Shononagi takes off. That'll cross MacArthur Road. And then there's kind of that remnant piece where there's some houses now north of that. So part of the discussion, and just do this real quickly, is to whether some of that gets called South and North Merrill Hills Road or Old and New Merrill Hills Road, or what happens to it. That has implications for people who live on those roads. It has implications for trying to find them. Maybe neither of those suggestions are any good. Maybe it should just be a completely different name. I mean, I tossed that out for discussion, and again, part of what's coming is discussion about jurisdictional transfer, so we're being given an opportunity to weigh in on it at this point in time, and we may not resolve that tonight, but are there any preliminary thoughts on that or whatever? I mean, I guess I'll start it off. I'm not particularly fond of the suggestions of Old and New. There's part of the drawing there, kind of laser pointer, but Old and New Merrill Hills Road. I'm not really fond of North and South Merrill Hills Road. But that's a decision eventually they've allowed us to weigh in on. Anybody have any thoughts about that, or you understand what the request is?
Do you have any other names in mind?
No, I don't. We could ask for anybody who wants to put naming rights on it. I mean, for $20,000 or something, we could turn some heads, couldn't we, if anybody in the audience wants a road named after them?
Is this a decision from the board or the decision at the county? Because they're county roads right now.
They're county roads not right now. They have asked for our input, and again, to be sure, the request for jurisdictional transfer is coming. We're not talking about that tonight, but they have given us an opportunity to weigh in on it, so. I don't know that there's absolute urgency we do it tonight, but at least want to start the thought process. I don't think we have to act on it, but at least need to think about it. Everybody's smiling. Does anybody want to say anything? If not, we can move on.
I don't know, I think it creates a burden for the homeowners, they'll have to change.
It does.
Address.
I don't really see a point in it, personally.
Well, that's a point. I mean, do we have to change the name of the roads? I mean, is that something that's required now at this point with the bypass cutting them in half, or?
I don't know that we have to do that. I don't know, Chief, do you have some thoughts do you want to share? You don't have to get into it, but are there issues that are involved in terms of emergency responders finding locations or not?
There is some concern, not so much on the long stretches, but when you get to where these roads are going to dead end and be next to each other, you're going to have addresses that are very close to each other. If it all remains Merrill Hills Road and you've got South 2230 on one side and you've got South 2232 on the other side of the dead end, and they go to the wrong dead end, you're looking at a 3-mile drive around to get back to where you're supposed to be. Not everybody's going to know where that division is all the time. So it has a little bit of bearing on emergency response, yes.
Any questions of Chief, or you guys just want to sit on this and think about it a bit, or what? Maybe we can double back. I don't know whether there's anything compelling us to act on this tonight or whatever. The issue will probably come back. Just move on. Anybody else got anything more to say?
Sit on it.
All right. There's something to think about. All right. Discussion and possible action on a request for approval of an extension of the 45-mile-per-hour zone on Highway 59 west of Merrill Hills Road, and notify the Wisconsin Department of Transportation of the action. Petitioner Eugene. Again, please. Thank you. S36W 26580 Genesee Road. This is notice for Administrator Nicholas. I mean, you folks are here. Thank you, and we'll let you introduce yourselves in a minute. Do you want to speak to this first?
I just wanted to say that the petitioner has gone back and forth with the Wisconsin DOT, and we've been exchanging emails for the last couple weeks. This was a request that they wanted to bring to the board.
But the facts are that we do not have jurisdiction. All the board can do is make a request, is that correct? I mean, we
That's
should make
correct.
sure we know, everybody on the board knows the facts. We don't decide the speed limit on this road, Kathy? I mean, don't
That's
presume that
correct.
everybody knows, so at least
Okay.
the public may not know that. And they can brief that, because I think their request is very specific and pertinent, but as long as everybody knows what the request is and what the facts are.
Right. We do not have any jurisdiction. The DOT had stated that they would like to hear what the town has to say about changing that sign, but they do not have to take your opinion.
Why don't you, if you would, introduce yourselves and please speak to us?
So, we are Gene and Kathy Kinnear representing ourselves and our neighbors of the Valley View subdivision in regards to the DOT placement of the 55-mile-an-hour speed limit as part of the West Waukesha bypass. And as a footnote, the Valley View subdivision is also, I've seen on a map called the Clover Knoll subdivision. It's right over here on Valley View Road. So before I start, has everyone had some time to review the packet that, that was put together? Because it's quite extensive. Okay, here's an overview of the situation, but before I start, there's some additional handouts that aren't in a package that I put together as I prepared my presentation. Can I approach the bench to give you the handout?
Sure.
I have 4 copies. This guy will want to pass. Well, somebody's got to have one. There, I'll share.
Okay.
Kathy's gotta have one and the chairman's gotta have one.
We're looking on here together. That's fine.
So the West Waukesha Bypass Project will replace the current Highway X and Highway 59 intersection with 2 new distinct intersections as shown on this page. Page that you have. So if you look at item A on the page, it's light colored, that is the current intersection. So this kind of gives you a nice pictorial of the old and the new. If you look at item B, it shows where Highway X will become a separate, unique intersection, and the bypass intersection is just north of there. I also want to point out that the X on this page shows the current location of the 55-mile-an-hour speed limit. And then towards the left-hand bottom, written in red is 55. That's the new location that the DOT is planning to replace the 55-mile-an-hour speed limit. And item C is right at Valley View Road, and one of the changes that will occur is the eastbound lanes of Valley View Road will go from 1 lane to 2 lane. And that is so as they approach the new intersection, they'll be fanning out into turning lanes. So it's changing quite a bit. It's a huge change compared to what we have today. So even today, the 55-mile-an-hour speed limit sign as marked by X on that diagram is an accident waiting to happen. Daily, we experience drivers tailgating and riding our bumpers as they merge and accelerate to 55 miles an hour, just as we slow down and turn into Valley View Road or the frontage road. The frontage road is also right there. The 55-mile-per-hour speed limit also makes entering onto Highway 59 dangerous. Because of this dangerous situation, years ago, we asked the DOT to move the 55-mile-an-hour speed limit sign west. So this is not a new request. This is current conditions, and the minds of myself and the residents believe that the sign should be moved anyhow. And I mentioned that Valley View Road at the intersection will be going from 1 eastbound lane to 2 eastbound lanes. And you do have this. Page 9 of your handout from the DOT shows in detail the location of the 55-mile-an-hour speed limit sign right there. May I? Over here is the new Highway X going from 4 lanes to 2 lanes as we approach Valley View Road. And over here we have the 2-lane eastbound lanes spreading out to go into turn lanes as you approach the new Highway X intersection. So all this merging is occurring this way. We have more traffic flowing this way, and the DOT says, everybody speed up please at this location. And we've requested through petitions that this sign be moved past the frontage road. Mineral Hills Road is here, and then there's a frontage road with a east and west entrance too that people get onto 59 with. So we get back to the microphone. we requested that the DOT move that 55-mile-an-hour speed limit, or the sign, okay? Valley View subdivision has 27 homes with families. Over 24 children ride school buses. And elderly residents also access Highway 59 from that point, right where they're planning on putting a new speed limit sign several times a day. And the frontage road, as I mentioned, also has 12 homes. And my driveway access is directly onto Highway 59. So this is a kind of a congested area that the DOT says go faster, not slower, and be cautious.
I do wanna interject here. When you come on Highway 59 from maybe East Avenue, to Sunset, where it's like country road right there, there's really nothing there, it's 45 there. That should be 55 and 45 where there's residents. It doesn't make sense to me. I mean, this doesn't make sense to the residents either. So it just doesn't make sense that they would be doing it 45 where there's no residents to 55 where there's all these residents.
As Kathy mentioned, the town of Waukesha does not have any legal authority to place the sign wherever they want it. I want to read something from the DOT, which is in your packet. The DOT has formally stated, since the request is now to lower the speed limit out west of Merrill Hills Road, and I'll provide a little bit more information on that. So the lower the speed limit out west of Merrill Hills Road, this is a more significant request. Your previous request was to move the 55-mile-an-hour speed limit sign east of the intersection of Genesee Frontage Road. The initial request was a bit less involved since it was a shorter extension of the 45-mile-per-hour zone. Since the request is now to move it west of Merrill Hills Road, it is a change in statutory speed limit for that longer segment. Requests for this type of speed change should come to the DOT through the local municipality so that we know the municipality is aware of the request. So that's why we're here tonight, is to gain your approval to move the speed limit sign west.
Suggestion, they can't approve it.
Well, is that clear?
Yes.
Okay. So, and I just want to mention too, as we proceed, we're open with the DOT for a compromise of the sign location.
We understand they can't take it to Merrill Hills. We already know that from the DOT, that they absolutely shut that down. But we're hoping for a compromise of some kind, someplace further west.
So, can I continue?
Sure.
Okay. So on May 8th, we presented to the Waukesha County Traffic Safety Commission with the DOT attendant and participated. And then this is, I just want to clarify that as, please note that the original request as stated in the petition, and the petitions you have enclosed in your packet, 25 residents from Valley View signed a petition, and the petition stated, let's move it east of the frontage road. But as I talked to the residents, the vast majority of people said, that's not good enough, let's move it west of Merrill Hills Road. That's where that change came about. Okay, so here's some of my notes from the Waukesha County Traffic Safety Commission meeting. The DOT listened to the safety concerns of the residents and also the specific safety concerns of Brooke Fra and Megan Piper, who are very concerned about their children's school bus safety entering and exiting Highway 59. A Waukesha County Sheriff deputy at the meeting stated the only time traffic slows down on Highway 59 is when he's in a squat, not when he's entering and leaving in his own private vehicle. During the meeting, the DOT constantly referred to statistics with the typical location of the 55-mile-an-hour speed limit sign is correct based on their statistics and road improvements. We believe the DOT essentially ignored the daily real-life experiences and safety concerns of the residents, even though we stress this is a non-typical situation and area. Is the DOT waiting for a resident to become an accident statistic before they listen? So, to continue, if I may.
Sure.
Also in your packet is the DOT's formal response letter. It's, I believe, 16 pages long with all their statistics and traffic studies in there. Okay, and on page 5, the DOT formally stated at this time the posted speed limit will remain as designed for the future configuration. So they're not willing to budge at all. So we, the citizens, are not requesting we are not questioning the DOT statistics on why and where they believe the 55-mile-an-hour speed limit sign should be placed. Statistics are used to represent typical standard situations and conditions. We are stressing that the planned location of the 55-mile-an-hour speed limit sign is a non-typical, non-standard location containing 27 homes in the Valley View subdivision, 12 homes on frontage road, and as part of the Waukesha bypass project, the closer merging of 4 to 2 lanes closer to Valley View Road, and as I mentioned before, the addition of an eastbound lane by Valley View Road. A sidewalk is also being included as part of the project because the DOT recognizes this area as semi-urban. Why should the speed increase to 55 in a semi-urban area with a sidewalk used by pedestrians and bicyclists? Why not relocate the sign further west? One more comment, speed limit signs on a bypass typically are very large. If you stand next to one, they're like 3 feet by 5 feet. They're huge. Such a large sign could block the view of vehicles to people accessing 59 from Valley View Road or the frontage road or my driveway. Moving the sign west entirely removes this risk factor. Okay, so closing. The DOT, like other government agencies, should be a governing body of the people, by the people, and for the people. The DOT has listened to the people, but appears not to hear the people and their daily real-life experiences. The DOT appears only to be governing by statistics. If we're successful in changing the speed limit sign to 55, it will, from 55 to 45, it will only take 4 additional seconds to travel between Valley View Road and Merrill Hills Road, because they'll be going 45 instead of 55. 4 seconds is not asking too much to reduce potential accidents with potential serious injuries. So once again, that's why we're here. We're trying to gain the town of Waukesha support to relocate the speed limit sign west of Highway 50, west of Valley View Road. And the companion eastbound sign for people to slow down right across from that sign. So that's another key point. The DOT says they don't have to slow down until right here. Valley View Road, they're rushing in, and then we go into different turning lanes, and they say, oh, slow down here. Once we pass Valley we slow down now. So we're saying wherever this sign gets moved west,
That goes with it.
45 speed limit signs are reduced should be moved to that same location. So we're asking the town to get on board with us and to provide that recommendation that you agree the location should be moved further west.
Thanks for a very comprehensive presentation. I just ask a question. I want to make sure I have understanding and clarification of it. And I think you were referring to it or reading from it, but this document that's entitled Evaluation of Posted Roadway Speed dated June 6th. I mean, is that at the moment kind of the resting place for the DOT, if you will, this communication from a week ago? I mean, that's their
Yes.
official opinion or communication as of a week ago?
Because since I received that and came to the town to talk to Kathy, I told the DOT that I will be presenting at this meeting to gain your approval. And once with the approvals came, and if you agree and approve moving the sign west and recommend to the DOT, then our battle still continues with the DOT.
Understood.
But if we don't get your approval, the DOT will say, oh, the town doesn't agree, go away.
Okay, so just to crystallize it and let other people jump in, just to crystallize it, your specific request that you're asking us to embrace is to place the 55-mile-an-hour signs where?
Well, west, according to the majority of the residents of the Valley View subdivision, they want it west of Merrill Hills Road. So that would be, there were some residents here that left, but if you would read through the comments of the petitions that each person signed, you'll see the majority say west of Valley View, west of Merrill Hills Road.
Okay.
So that would be the request, but there again, we don't want to close the door on any compromise.
Okay, other people, questions, comments? Members of the board?
I have 2 children that go to Rose Glen. I'd like to see it be lowered to 45 west of Rose Glen, but I know that won't.
That's
That
not there.
that also is a comment from one of the residents in one of the signed petitions. And if you consider the speed limit by the high school is 35,
Correct.
but the speed limit for the middle, is it grade school or middle school?
Elementary grade.
Oh, okay, is 55. And school buses turn in and they're out. So I think we got to agree upon what we're going to tell the DOT. But I agree with that, with Mr. German.
A question, do you know and I don't know the answer to this, but the rather extensive time you've spent with this, I mean, informationally, the meeting we had the other day, I come to realize people should know the bypass, the construction of the bypass is now going to be designated Highway 18, and it's going to be Les Paul Parkway all the way up to its connection on Summit. I mean, 18 is basically being pulled out of the city and will go around the bypass, join 59, 164 continue. Does anybody know, and if you don't, we're not going to guess, but does anybody know what speed limit they're proposing for that extension of the bypass from the big intersection? Does anybody know the answer to that? I don't.
The DOT told me that the speed limit on the entire bypass route, both the old one that exists today and a new one, will be 45 miles an hour.
Correct.
The old one is 45 now, so your
Yeah.
belief or understanding is that will continue northbound?
Yes.
Okay.
And I won't go there.
Well, fair enough. I sort of went there. I mean,
we're at the very end of the west. We're at the very end of the west end of the Waukesha bypass. And this is only being affected because X is getting disjoined and becoming a separate intersection, so they have to enhance that part of 59 to hook up with the new Highway X intersection. So I officially believe that this whole area that we're talking about where the sign is going to be located is considered a part of the West Waukesha bypass. they have government funding to do that, otherwise they wouldn't even be doing a road there or putting in that sidewalk.
You'd think, wouldn't you? Okay.
Yes.
I mean, I think this is a reasonable request. That's my preliminary thought, but I'd appreciate hearing what other people have to say.
I gotta do Dave Supervisor German one more. I've got 5 grandchildren there, so I gotta beat them.
I'm not a granddad yet.
No, I agree with the speed limit being
Yeah.
that. I, for a long time, I thought it was a little too fast through there.
To
so I-
west of Merrill Hills Road, is that what you're
I
saying?
would go along with west of Merrill Hills Road if they would go along with that.
Is that
I mean,
where you're
that
at,
would be
David?
As far as the school at least, or beyond the school, but.
Yeah.
Jim, thoughts?
Beyond the school?
Go past it.
Well, can we take a straw vote from the residents here?
No.
Okay.
Sorry, I know you want to, but you can't. Well, of course.
I'm not opposed to lowering it, but I don't know what the DOT's gonna do. I mean, you've
I
spent
agree.
some time in front of them, and you've
They just don't seem to take people's lives. They
Until you
don't- they
become a
don't-
statistic.
yeah, they're into statistics, so if you're not a statistic yet, then it doesn't matter.
What is in that document from the DOT, our statistics about accidents?
Understood.
People drive, 85% of the people drive 8 miles faster than the speed limit anyhow, so if we lower it, we're gonna take, and the few people that slow down, we're gonna have additional accidents, so they just stick to the statistics, and they don't give any value to the people who live there, or their children, or their grandchildren.
I was just going to say a bit tongue-in-cheek, and we're going to move this on, but lighten it up. I enjoyed the reading, and I decided I might keep some of that paperwork to be in the 85th percentile. I mean, I think the sheriff's department people left tonight, but I might have use for that at some point in time or what or not. If they want a
That's-
statistic who's driving over the speed limit, I might be able to use that.
Well, I was gonna, off record, that I can't say anything. But if you get a ticket, and, well, I'm just following what the DOT says, 85% of us drive over, so send
There you go.
the ticket to DOT.
Okay, folks, we need to kind of move on in the lateness of the hour. I mean, we have, well, I mean, hang on a minute. Do we have further discussion or not?
Do we need a recommendation to the DOT?
I
or
think
is
we
that what
do,
you want?
yeah. I mean, that's
would-
where they're
Is there a
here.
motion to authorize the town chairman to send a letter to the appropriate entities at the Department of Transportation requesting that the sign be located, is it west of
Merrill Hills
Merrill
Road.
Hills Road?
I would make that motion.
I thought you just did, yeah. Did
Yeah, I
anybody
thought I did.
second it?
I'll second it.
Okay, the motion by Supervisor Stigler, seconded by Supervisor German. Everybody understands it, all in favor, to give by saying aye? Aye. Opposed? Thank you very much for your
Thank you
time.
for your time.
Okay, moving along quickly here. Next item is 7I, discussion possible action on the Bellman Homes request for the closeout of Cider Hills subdivision project and reduce the letter of credit from $63,977.48 to zero. Administrator Nicholas, I mean, we've got a letter on that. That's fairly
That's correct.
self-explanatory.
You do have a letter from Engineer Janelli, and I did want to just mention that I did check with him to make sure that he went out and reviewed the road before writing this recommendation. So he did go out and see that the road was in good shape.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? If not, let's have a motion, please.
I'll make a motion that we close out the letter of credit from 63,977.48 to zero as discussed.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, that's pretty straightforward. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. Item 7. Hang on here. I flipped my paperwork around. We've got item 7J is discussion and possible action on hiring engineering company to do the report and ratings for the 2019 Wisconsin Department of Transportation. Whistler, the road evaluation administrator, Nicholas.
I normally don't bring this to you, because Rupert Milker normally does do our report and our rating. But I did want to bring it to your attention. We did get an offer from Ayers Associate to do a flat fee of $2,500 to do the exact same work. I reached out to Engineer Janelli, and he said their work would be around $5,000. I had told him I received this one for $2,500. He was unwilling to budge. I wanted to bring it to your attention. If you are interested in using the lower rate, or if you feel that consistency with our current engineer is required.
Discussion or a motion, whatever.
I don't see any reason to keep the consistency with our existing. I think Rupert and Milky can do the same.
I'm sorry, what was the last thing you said?
I think Rupert and Milky can do the same as what we've had for a lower price. So my motion would be to go ahead and go with that.
Go with the new vendor?
Correct.
So your motion would be to accept the proposal from Ayers and Associates to do the work for $2,500? I mean, that's the essence of it?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a second to the motion?
Well, for discussion purposes, I'll second it, but I'm still confused here. Can we go back? We're gonna dump our Rupert and Milky for engineering? Now, what are we?
No.
No, okay.
I know. So Rupert Milky does all of our engineering.
Okay.
This firm has said that they could reduce our cost on doing the Pazer or the road ratings for us by half. And so the rest of the engineering firm work would still continue with Rupert Milky. This Whistler program rating would be done by Ayers if you so choose.
Is this something that Jerry used to do, the ratings?
No, Jerry never did the Pazer ratings. It's always been done by Rupert Milky since I've been here for 5 years. And they were doing it beforehand. So they just continued. Now Jerry does do ratings himself, but they are not the same type of ratings and he has no access to Pazer to put them into the system.
Further discussion?
When you had that discussion, Kathy, with Engineer Janelli, did he have any issue with that?
No.
Then I think it's a no-brainer.
For what it's worth, before we vote, I will abstain on this simply because one of my sons works for Reichert and Melke, so that will be my vote, and that's the explanation for it. Any further discussion? If not, we'll proceed to vote. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Aye. So there are 3 ayes and 1 abstention. Okay, discussion, possible action on alcohol beverage licenses. Administrator Nicholas.
So all the licenses you have in front of you are renewals. We have not had any incidents with the Sheriff's Office on any one of the 4.
Okay, I would like to take these individually. The first one is the Neighbors Bar and Grill. Motion or discussion on the approval of the alcoholic beverage license for Neighbors Bar and Grill?
I'll make a motion that we approve the alcohol beverage license for Neighbors Bar and Grill.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, Supervisor Radke and Supervisor German, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
K2, same thing for Tally's Tap and Eatery, Inc. Is there a motion for that?
I'll make a motion, we approve the alcohol beverage license for Tally's Tap.
Second it.
Okay, Supervisor Radke and Supervisor Stigler for Tally's Tap and Eatery, Inc. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. The Legend at Merrill Hills, K3.
I'll continue and recommend the alcohol and beverage license for Legends at Merrill Hills.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, Supervisor Radke again, Supervisor Stigler, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
And finally, Lilac Acres Farm LLC.
I'll continue. Alcohol and beverage license I'll recommend for Lilac Acres Farm LLC.
Is there a second? Is there a second?
For discussion, I'll second it, but I got a question. I thought, did you say, Kathy, this is a renewal for them? I didn't know they had one.
Yes. it
When
is
did
an
they get
renewal.
issued a liquor license?
Boy, it was, the early part of this year. I believe it was February.
Prior to a building?
They have a building on site that they can purchase from. They have to have the license in order to establish their accounts.
I'm gonna warn you, there's a very specific procedure that has to be followed if you're going to not renew a license. They have a right to this license under the state law.
I'm not denying it, I guess I'm just questioning. I didn't think they had one, that's why we're gonna ask that.
Yes, they received a reserve license. They paid the $10,000 fee for it.
Okay, I didn't realize that that could be done until, like Dave said, the building wasn't up yet or anything. I thought they had to be actively serving to renew it.
I have a concern on the application form, about halfway down the first page on that under item 4. It says premises description, describe building or buildings where alcohol beverages are to be sold and stored. The applicant must include all rooms, including living quarters if used for the sales, service, consumption and or storage of alcoholic beverages and records. And then in parentheses, alcohol beverages may be sold and stored only on the premises described. And then the applicant has written within the 4 walls of the reception bar, ceremony barn, and I believe it's wedding house and event deck. And my concerns about that in terms of describing those areas, my recollection is, and I reviewed that when this came in as a proposal and request for approvals, I believe that it was clearly indicated that the large deck that had been in previous proposals had been eliminated. I think the current drawings may show some large patio areas, but now this is referencing again an event deck, if I'm reading that correctly, so I question what that is. I question the sale or storage of alcohol in the ceremony barn and in the wedding house. And part of my concern about that is I think that was represented to be adaptive reuse of existing farmhouse. And I've been advised that that farmhouse has been raised and there's a new structure being built there. I thought it was represented that was simply going to be for wedding party to change clothes and things of that nature. So I don't understand, and I have real concern about the scope of the premises description where alcohol would be sold and stored. And if there's no one here tonight, I don't know that anybody can answer those questions, but that's my concern.
Well, the only legal issue is whether or not those are the same description that was approved previously.
And I think they're not.
I don't know, we have to pull last approval.
Well, what I'm saying is, I believe that the representation is that there would not be a deck, a large event deck. And again, my concern is about this event, or wedding house or whatever it's called, because that was represented to be adaptive reuse of the existing farmhouse simply for clothes changing. So this seems to me like that shifted a great deal.
Clerk Nicholas, is it possible to pull last year's license?
You know, my issue, and that's fine, but pertains to more than simply the licensure. It's the representation of what that is.
Well, while she's doing that, I'll read the reasons that you cannot renew a license. If you'd like me to read them into the record.
Please.
The person has violated this chapter, chapter 125 of the Wisconsin statutes or municipal regulation adopted under 12510. The person keeps or maintains a disorderly or riotous, indecent, or improper house. The person has sold or given away alcohol beverages to known habitual drunkards. The person does not possess the qualifications required under this chapter to hold a license. The person has been convicted of manufacturing, distributing, or delivering a controlled substance or controlled substance analog under 961.411 of possessing with intent to manufacture, distribute, or deliver a controlled substance or controlled substance or delivering a controlled substance or controlled substance analog under substantially similar federal law or substantially similar law of another state. The person has been convicted of possessing any of the materials listed in 961.65 with the intent to manufacture under the subsection or under federal law or law of another state substantially similar. Personally knowingly allows another person who is on the premise for which the license under the chapter is issued to possess with the intent to manufacture, to deliver, or distribute, manufacture controlled substance or controlled substance analog. The person knowingly allows another person who is under the premise for which the license under this chapter is issued to possess any of the materials listed under 961.65 with the intent to manufacture met. The person receives the benefit prohibited under 125.3311, which I'd have to look up. The reason for non-renewal are very specific. Told everyone all the time that you have all kinds of reasons not to give a new license, but once they have a license, they have all kinds of rights, and those are the reasons you can deny the renewal of the license.
Okay, so the last year's license said within the four walls of the event house, the event barn, the event chapel, and the event deck.
Okay, further discussion.
All those reasons that Mr. Macy's came up with were for existing,
And this is an existing license.
but there's been no sale of alcohol on this premises.
They haven't even gone into operation yet.
Right.
Doesn't make any difference. They have a license. If a Hyatt Regency wants to build in a community, they get the license years in advance.
I understand that, but again, my point of view, and I appreciate and understand what you read, I'm saying the pretense under which this was requested in the first place, I think does not comport with the plan of operation they presented and was approved by the town of Waukesha. That's my point of view.
And the state of Wisconsin does not say that's a reason for denial of a renewal of a license.
Well,
And you cannot deny the license tonight. You could not approve it, but you've got to hold a hearing, and you've got to give all the notices,
okay.
and so that, that would be the motion, but you're gonna have to give them a notice that fits underneath one of those reasons, because I just read you.
Well, but maybe the discussion starts on this event house, as I see that, for lodging and so forth. That is in complete violation of the original plan of operation that was presented to and approved by the town of Waukesha.
Well, that's your opinion, and
It
I'm not
is.
gonna get an argument with the chairman, but your staff has ruled otherwise and issued the permit.
We're not going to argue about it tonight, but that is indeed my point of view.
They have a permit, and it was in compliance according to the zoning, and no one has challenged the zoning administrator's determination to issue the building permit.
Well, that may be a discussion for a future day. So we've got a motion on the floor. Huh?
It's not very timely if they're already building.
Well, I understand that, but it's not very timely not to even bring that to the attention of the town board. How untimely is that, Counselor? To proceed with that without ever sharing that with the plan commission or the town board, that's not timely. Whoever rendered those decisions. All right, we've got a motion on the floor, which is to approve the alcoholic beverage license for Lilac Acres Farm LLC. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Okay. Opposed, aye. All right, so that passes 3-1. Discussion and possible action on cigarette tobacco licenses, Tally's Tap and Eatery, Inc. Want to take these separately? Is there a motion for that?
I'll make a motion that we approve the cigarette tobacco license for Tally's Tap.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And the cigarette and tobacco license for the Legend at Merrill Hills. Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion, cigarette and tobacco license renewal for Legend at Merrill Hills.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. M, discussion and possible action on operators' licenses, of which there are many. What is the appropriate way to proceed with those, Counselor?
I'll make only one motion to approve all of the licenses, or you could approve them all but one, you can,
Okay.
pull one out, however you wanna do it.
Does anybody want to pull any of those out for,
Mr. Chairman,
Special
I'll make a
discussion.
motion that we approve all of them with the exception of Dustin Davis.
that's Dustin Davis. Okay, is there a second to the motion? Or does anybody want to pull any others out or second the motion?
I'll second it for discussion purposes.
Okay, discussion?
The reason I pulled out Dustin Davis is there's a letter from the owner of Tally's Tap, as well as from the applicant Dustin Davis, as to his history, that I think will require some more discussion.
Okay.
Or a meeting or hearing, if that's the best word, Counselor?
Yes, you can, well, you can order them in to talk to them, and then if you're still not satisfied, you'd have a right to a hearing. So you can start with the hearing immediately, or you can do it informally to begin with. Our normal procedure is to do as is indicated, they're all here. And if there are questions, I think we had one instance where we ordered somebody in, but we requested that they come in, but we didn't have the scheduled hearing yet. So you can have the informal before the formal, but if you wanna do the formal right away, you can do so. But the first motion is to approve the rest, and then we can take that one.
Okay, further discussion? Okay, that was moved in.
Excuse me, Mr.
Yep.
Chairman. Greg Beatty, if I recollect, he was for 5 Diamonds. Was he not part of the license on K?
That's a separate permit, I believe, is that correct, rather than a license? It's a,
Right, this
Considered
isn't,
a
this is just
permit?
operator's license. It means he can serve anywhere in the town.
no, but I think his question was back to, if I misunderstand it, why isn't 5 Diamonds under K? And is it because that's a permit
That's a,
rather than a
yeah.
license?
It's a license, but it's a temporary license, so they have to get special approval every time they have it,
Okay,
so.
Does that answer your question?
yes.
Okay. Okay, did we have a second on that motion for
Stigler,
every other than Dustin Davis?
Stigler.
You? Okay, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. Okay, do you want to pick up from there, Jim, with Dustin Davis?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we call Dustin Davis in for a meeting with the board at our next scheduled meeting.
That'd be June 27th,
Second. Mhm.
correct?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, item N is discussion and possible action on ordinance to create the position full-time lieutenant slash firefighter slash EMT-P inspector, and to repeal the position of full-time firefighter slash EMT inspector and one on-call Lieutenant Chief Buchholz. And if I understand correctly, you would like to have this tabled tonight, but the floor is yours.
Yes, I would request that we table this to the next meeting. We don't quite have all the documents prepared for tonight's.
Okay. Would someone like make a motion to that effect?
I'll make a motion, we table it to the next meeting.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Quickly, you think you would be prepared by the 27th? Was that your request or not?
I'm planning on it, yes.
Okay. All right, thank you. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, and opposed? That passes unanimously. Item 8 is accounts payable. Authorized payment of the bills. A motion would be in order to authorize payment of the bills in the amount of $92,286.75. Is there such a motion?
Also move.
And a second.
I'll second.
Okay, moved by Supervisor Stigler, Supervisor Radke with a second on that roll call vote, please.
Supervisor Stigler.
Yes.
Chairman Fisher.
Aye.
Supervisor Radke.
Aye.
Supervisor German.
Aye.
Okay, that passes unanimously. Then we have announcement of 3 closed sessions. They are separate agenda items. I guess the pleasure of the board, we could, unless Counselor Kathy has a different idea, we could, I guess, vote to go into separate votes, but vote to go into closed session on all of those, or we can vote, and if we go into closed session, come back out or whatever. Is there a preferred procedure or proper procedure for that?
Yes, we're recommending because of the nature of them, that we do them individually.
Okay, and then go in and come back out separately. Okay. So the first one, 9, is you're hereby notified that the town board of the town of Waukesha will convene and may, upon motion duly made and seconded and acted upon by roll call vote, as required under Wisconsin Stats 1985 1G, go into closed session during the course of the meeting. The board members may attend the closed session. The purpose of the closed session will be as follows: to confer with legal counsel for the governmental body who is rendering oral or written advice concerning strategies to be adopted by the board with respect to litigation in which it is likely to become involved, specifically to address non-compliance property for Joyce House, S43W22351, Beheim Road. Is there a motion to go into closed session?
I'll make a motion, we go into closed session on the non-compliance for the property for Joyce House.
Is there a second?
And a second.
Roll call vote, please.
Supervisor Radke.
Aye.
Supervisor Stigler.
Aye.
Supervisor German.
Aye.
Chairman Fisher.
Aye. Okay, we're in closed session.
It's terrible. I understand, I know you got a lot of property there.
It's the shoulder. They goofed up on putting that shoulder in.
Yeah, I know. And as far as like, when I took my look at the weed commissioner, okay, they were totally unbiased and everything. That's what I looked at. And it has nothing to do with the weeds or anything like that. It goes back to when they sent out that letter on 2017 taxes, and the ordinance was on the books, and it wasn't created, it just was sitting there.
Yeah.
So I'm like Attorney Macy said, and I am too, okay? Either you, no matter who it is, who it affects, you need to either enforce the ordinance or change it. You only have two choices. We can't ignore it. Okay, so that's the dilemma that we have. And what I said tonight in regard to, those two issues, especially in Pleasant Run and that, and then on Palmer, we know the ones in Pleasant Run. I dealt with that, okay? But there was a resident that filled out a complaint form and he put it in my file.
Sure.
Okay,
And
I
that's
did
what
my
I
job.
do.
I did my job.
And I wanted to do it myself, but I didn't want my name plastered.
And the thing is, I agree with him, okay? But because one of those business, and I believe it was Mike Dorr that he called, and then Mike Dorr told him I don't have to do it, and then Kathy comes and tells me, no, you don't have jurisdiction there. And I disagree with that, because if we read the ordinance and the state, okay, the state statute is only for noxious weeds, okay? Only for noxious weeds. Each municipality has the right for lengths of lawn and grasses. Okay? We have 12 inches, Brookfield has 8 inches. Okay? It's nothing to do with the state statute, all right? It's municipality. But my point is, what is, okay, and after people complain about this, and then they didn't do nothing with town line, after I spent 3 days on that thing, the whole county, this is a lot of time figuring all this out. Okay, and now you just throw it aside? Oh, I was pissed. And then, anyways, but the thing is, if you look at the town ordinances, it doesn't differentiate between where the weeds and grasses are, whether it's in a culvert or in property. So now she says, well, you only have to go up to the property line, you don't have jurisdiction in the ditches. That's what she told me last year. Okay, and this is my big complaint with discussing with the bishop. Okay? Now, okay, and because I disagree with that. And, but now here's the other kicker. I've had, last 2 years, I had a bunch of vacant lots in subdivisions, right? Out of control, up to all the way to the road. All I do is I write up the property numbers and I tell them I got to cut everything. And if it's really nasty, I clean it up. Okay, well, they cut all the way out to the road. I'm not gonna tell them they got to cut to the property line and do this. And the other issue with Pheasant Run was, okay, where Pheasant Run intersected with Cornell, and then where it intersected for Marlene, you couldn't see the traffic.
No, you couldn't.
Okay, and that's a separate ordinance. Actually, I gave a copy of, that's why I walked up to him, but I thought he was gonna read it, he didn't. I got all this new, with all the new numbers and everything printed out. And that thing about, okay, so anyways, most of the property owners that approached me while I was out there looking up what I'm doing, because they see the trucks that okay, fine. And they were all really cool about it. They understood, okay, you got a job to do, we understand, here's the ordinance. They hired people and they cut all this down. Okay, all right. So anyways, so there was a couple that says, okay, weed commissioner shall investigate the existence of noxious weeds in his or her district, blah, 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 and then either if they don't destroy it, then I can destroy it or whatever. Okay, it doesn't say ditches or property. Okay, and that's a current state statute. All right, you don't know what he's talking about, which is not nothing new again. He's not the sharpest knife you throw as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, I mean, he knows some stuff.
Which guy?
In turn,
June, okay.
I'm not John Mason, I'm not an expert on law, but I can read a statute.
Yeah.
Okay, and even if you look at the, lawns and grasses, they link the regulation, okay, and it says property, okay? Well, then maybe if I get a complaint, maybe I should write the town of Waukesha because they're the owner of the ditch and culvert. But then again, I told Brian, that you have an ordinance that tells the property owner next to it that they're responsible. So you have two different interpretations here. So he is trying to get this worked out, but it's gonna take time. And he and I resolved this summer. Fortunately, I've only had a couple complaints. One was new, I just looked at that Friday. And actually, it's a landlocked property in the town of Waukesha. That's landlocked, mostly with the city. And the people that complained are actually in the city. But it's in their backyard. And I asked them, Kathy, she said, yeah, they have a legal right to do it. I said, that's fine, I wanna make sure they don't make us know. So I investigated, it's, someone's home company LLC, and worked out. So, the other issue is this guy Carl Buster on too. So that's a separate issue. Anyways, so that's, but, otherwise I got one, okay, I had two of them, one is a repeat from last year, vacant lot next to neighbors, and then the other one is getting taken care of. Is a third year repeat, 2017, and this guy is like, nice guy, okay, but he gives me excuses and stuff, and I said, you know what, whatever. And, I said, I'm gonna notice, because if people complain, the people that complain next to it, you will have problems. They stick a lot of money into their landscaping and stuff. And this is, I mean, you couldn't cut it all year. And he's trying to tell me that this landscaping company, was supposed to cut it, okay. I mean, it's 3 feet tall.
Oh my.
Yeah, this is the people next to it, they're cutting it. Okay,
And that hasn't been cut?
it wasn't cut all year, okay? And he's trying to tell me, well, I have a schedule to cut it, maybe. And they're saying that they've been too busy and too wet. And I said, Mr. Schessel, we did yours before. Okay, it's not an excuse. I explained the ordinance to you in 2017, and we have very pleasant conversations, no worries. I gave you copies. In 2017, I was told, once you got it cut and straightened out, I said, you need to check on this, okay? You check on it like 3 weeks. Well, 5 weeks later, I got a complaint again, about the compliance. One of the people told us, yes. Right? So then, okay, so instead of, I should have given them a citation, the daily citation. I gave them a second notice to cut. And I gave them more time than anybody else, and finally we kept kind of up on it. And then he called me, well, I'm cutting. I told him, I said, you don't need to call me when it's cut. If I don't hear a complaint from it, just go out there, you live in West Dallas, whatever. You go out there, you check on it, and you tell them when to cut it. You cannot plan on having a schedule because you don't know how fast it's gonna roll, depending on the rain. They say, the ordinance states you cannot let it exceed 12 inches per year. I don't care if you cut it every 5 weeks or every 2 weeks, whatever it is.
What about the least?
So,
Down in the.
anyways, I actually came in here, when's the one I think I came in here? have to explain to that contractor that the bid has to be cut. So anyways, I was over in Milwaukee today, over in Butler, and he calls me. He says, well, they're all, you're cutting right now, and I had them come out today and cut, and, they're just finishing up, you need me out here and take a look at it. No, he did this every year, he does.
Sure, it's cut now.
He does, yeah, but he expects me to, I said, no, I'm not in the area. I said, Russ, I said, I will inspect it, and I will let you know. Okay, just like we've done before. Okay, know what it's supposed to look like, I trust that you're gonna, and you got, I know the contractor, and he's been doing a decent job. Okay, so, and I did, and they kept saying it was too wet. It was all the rain we had yesterday, and last night, and he cut it today. Okay, so, little fishy there. Okay. Yeah, okay.
I ain't going with you, I know that.
Okay, we are back in open session at 9:54. Is there,
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we allow the administrator to assess the fine as discussed in closed session.
is there a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, second closed session here is, you are hereby notified that the town board of the town of Waukesha will convene in May upon motion duly made and seconded and acted upon by roll call vote as required under Wisconsin Stats 1985 1E. Go into closed session. During the course of the meeting, town board members may attend the closed session. The purpose of closed session will be as follows: to deliberate and negotiate the purchase of public property, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specific public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session, specifically to deliberate or negotiate purchase of public property. Is there a motion to go into closed session?
I moved we go into closed session.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, a motion has been made and seconded. We need a roll call vote, please.
Supervisor Radke?
Aye.
Supervisor German?
Aye.
Chairman Fisher?
Aye.
And Supervisor Stigler?
Aye.
Okay, we're back in the closed session at 9:56.
But is this the potty break?
Yes, a comfort, people want a quick comfort break, let's do that.
I could use
It's a
it.
good
I'm
time.
old. You young guys.
Getting late in the evening. We'll take the potty break if you want.
I'm going to. Get out of your way. Is that what you're saying? I'm a man over 60.
there's a lot of trees hanging over the roads, hanging over the roads. Yeah, and they're too low. They're too low. If they're over the road, they can't be more than 14 feet. Because of trucks. Well, I'm on the back, so. All right, take care.
You too.
Okay, we are back in open session at 10:14 PM. And we will move on to item 13, third closed session, announced closed session. You are hereby notified that the town board of the town of Waukesha will convene and may upon motion duly made and seconded and acted upon by roll call vote as required by under Wisconsin Stats 1985 1G. Going to closed session. During the course of the meeting, town board members may attend the closed session. The purpose of closed session will be as follows: to confer with legal counsel for the governmental body who is rendering oral or written advice concerning strategy to be adopted by the body with respect to litigation in which it is or is likely to become involved, specifically to address the non-compliance property for Broad A Corporation. Is there a motion to go into closed session?
I'll make a motion, we go into closed session again.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, motion is made and seconded. Roll call vote, please.
Supervisor Radke.
Aye.
Supervisor Stigler.
Aye.
Supervisor German.
Nay.
Chairman Fisher.
Abstain. All right, we are in closed session.
Can you sign this while you're out? What's that? Can you sign that contract while you're out?
Oh, sure.
Thanks.
we are back in open session at 10:28 PM. Any further business to transact? Then a motion for
Mr.
adjournment.
Chairman, I'll make a motion that we allow the administrator to proceed as discussed in closed session.
Okay, is there a second?
I second the motion.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
And I will abstain. All right, is there a motion for adjournment?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
You can't.
I'm seconding it though.
You can if you want to.
No, I'm kidding.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, all right, we're adjourned at 10:38 PM. Thank you.